it puts men almost immediately into this place of, one, dysregulation, and to be dysregulated while you're trying to care for a new baby and your partner. It's just not a good place to be.
Welcome back to the Mindfulness Within podcast, the space where we explore ways to connect with our true selves, heal, and cultivate inner peace. I'm your host, Gilbert Romero Muharter, and I'm grateful you're here today. Today we're entering into a conversation that is deeply needed, yet often rarely spoken about: men and mental health. For so many men, emotional pain lives behind silence, behind the pressure to say, stay strong, push through, and never break. Maybe you're a man listening who's been carrying too much for too long. Maybe you love someone who seems steady on the outside, but internally feels overwhelmed, exhausted, or alone. However this topic touches your life, I want you to know you're not alone, and you don't have to shoulder everything by yourself. We'll be joined by Dr. Nucha Isarong, the ACT Program Director at the Barnard Center for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health at the University of Washington. Nucha's work centers on early childhood, family systems, and social cultural equity, and he brings powerful insight into how men's emotional lives are shaped by culture, identity, fatherhood, and the stories we are taught about strength. Together, we'll explore how internal family systems helps men reconnect with their inner world, not with shame, but with compassion. So wherever you are, take a deep breath in and a long breath out. If this space feels nourishing for you, take a moment to follow or subscribe. It helps this podcast reach others who might be suffering in silence. When we talk about men's mental health, we often talk about this as symptoms: stress, anxiety, burnout, depression. But underneath those symptoms are stories, expectations, internalized messages about manhood, strength, and emotional expression. In IFS, we understand these messages as shaping the roles our internal parts take on. For many men, a protector part might say, "Don't show weakness. No one needs to see this." A performer part might say, "Keep achieving, keep going, don't stop." A firefighter part might use work, substances, sex, or distraction to numb the pain. And beneath it all, a younger part might quietly ache. "I'm tired, I'm scared, I need connection." These parts are not flaws, they're adaptations. They're trying to keep men safe in a world that punishes vulnerability. And that brings us to today's guest, someone whose work deeply aligns with this conversation. Dr. Nucha Isarong serves as the ACT Program Director at the Barnard Center for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health at the University of Washington. He has extensive experience in working with infants, children, and families in diverse communities. His work focuses on culturally responsive mental health practices, system equity, trauma-informed care, and supporting fathers and male caregivers. He has previously taught in the social work and infant mental health programs at the Erickson Institute in Chicago and continues to advocate for inclusion, equity, and healing within family system. Nucha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Gil. It's an honor to be here.
Men often carry protective parts that have been working since childhood. Parts that learned early that vulnerability equals danger. So, Nucha, in your work with families and fathers, what do you often notice when men finally turn inward with compassion instead of avoidance?
Such a good question. And it really gets at the heart of how we, as men, as individuals who identify as men, um, adapt to the environment that we're in, right? So from very young ages, we know that kids are learning from their environment, from their caregivers, from all of the things that are happening around them. At the very youngest ages, those kids are um, getting those messages through their caregivers, their parents, and as they get older, they get messages from their babysitters, from their childcare providers, and those are the messages that tell them how they should be and act in the world. And those messages are generally culturally determined. So we're already making this connection, right? That we know that everything that happens with children happens within the context and an embeddedness with culture. And the culture that we grow up in are the ones that determine on how we're going to then adapt and utilize strategies and skills to survive the different aspects of ourselves that we utilize as ways of navigating difficulties and challenges. And they are about navigating difficulties and challenges. So when men, as you're in your question, when men finally do turn inward with compassion instead of avoidance, it's with a recognition that the ways that they have been adapting to the world, the strategies and behaviors that they've used are no longer working in the ways that they needed to work. And that there are both internal and external relational suffering that's occurring within their environment, within the families that they are involved in, within their relationship with friends, colleagues at work, etc. Right? That if um, if we're taught men have to be strong, which means we don't emote, we don't utilize emotions as ways of connecting with others, then we suppress it, we hide it, because the message has been that emotions are about weakness, except for anger. We see a lot of men really only turn to anger even when they're feeling sadness, when they're grieving, um, when when they're in these spaces of wanting I think as in your introduction, that inner child wanting to say, I need connection, I need someone that will hold me, rhetorically, as well as in other ways, right, physically as well, hold me and my emotions, so that I can experience what I need to experience in the moment. So turning inward, um, I believe, comes with the recognition of the world outside and how we have been adapting to that world, and now recognizing that this isn't working. It hasn't been working, and I need to do something differently from here on out.
Yeah, as you were talking, Nietzsche, I was thinking about how powerful men's protector parts are. You know, that repeated thought of don't show weakness. No one needs to see this. Don't show weakness. No one needs to see this. Not only how it shows up at work, but how it shows up in families. Right. So I was just thinking about a post I recently did on LinkedIn around men and postpartum and how there is so many layers of grieving and complexity to that, because we're thinking of dad, right? Like as the father figure, uh, dad and his partner in that relationship. And then kind of this forgotten piece of just dad as the individual and how much like each one of those parts need that comfort in different ways. And then I'm really wondering about hmm, these parts that learned early that vulnerability equals danger. What do you often notice when men finally think about their roles as father and also as partners?
I think you're asking about something that's really really challenging for most people, but I think for men in particular, there's an aspect about upholding what it means to be a man in the context of identity formation, right? That we become men. That there's a lot of messages that tell us that being a man are defined by these very narrow sets of adjectives. You're a protector. You're a breadwinner. You are the strong one. You must not show vulnerability. You must not show emotions that does not show that you're protecting your family. So it really narrows how it is that we can be in the world, in as opposed to how girls and women are socialized in our society to be. That there's an aspect about both needing nurturance and being nurturing that men aren't socialized to do by and large, right? That there are some men who grow up in families that encourage them to be nurturers, to to provide both the emotional and the physical types of support and love and care. There is no doubt, at least in my work, I have never had a doubt that a father loves their children. Um, how have they learned to show that love is a whole other story that comes with the history of how their fathers treat them and show them love. It comes with an understanding of how am I going to be perceived by friends, families, colleagues when I do show love in a way that maybe doesn't make me as manly or masculine as I need to be, right? That these messages are always there. Um, in addition to that, I think that there's also this underlying fear and anxiety that if I don't uphold what it means to be this masculine figure, that it might actually hurt me in in the ways that I actually hold privilege in society as a male, right? As a man, meaning that the privilege around making more money than my female counterparts, um, of advancing further in my career than my female counterparts do. That these are the privileges that come along with towing the line of what it means to be a man and being male and the way that I behave and act in with others in society and in the settings that I'm in. So it's protective both for ourselves, but also protective in a way that holds our position in our society and to hold on to the things that we do have access to currently. Not recognizing that we're being harmed and injured along the way when we deny those aspects of ourselves in the process.
As you were talking, I was thinking about the definition of vulnerability and what comes up in people's minds and then what comes up in men's minds. So, for instance, during a session, a male client just started bawling, and he was kind of like, "Are you happy? You finally made me cry." And it's like, my job is not to make you cry. My job is to be present and create a space for you so you can express and understand what's going on the inside. And he just like stopped. So I'm just I'm wondering what you see the impact of silence on men emotionally, relationally, culturally.
Well, that response alone, right, is interesting because you can hear like you did this and now I have to feel the effects of maybe the shame. So there's a Brene Brown talks about vulnerability and shame, and that there's an aspect of of shame that really does not allow us to lean into the aspects of ourselves that show up as weakness, the things that like how could I possibly show emotion and cry in the presence of another person? That's shameful. That makes me less of a man, right? That those messages are there and it's internalized for us. And so we're constantly pushing back against it, even though there are situations where it's like, of course I should be crying in this moment. How could I not be crying in this moment? There's something happening to my child, to my partner, my spouse, my parents are dying. All of these kinds of things that where it's perfectly understandable and natural for us to be in a state of emotional exhaustion and fatigued and like just needing to release it through tears. And we just hold it in. It's like, I need to be strong. I need to always be strong. And it becomes a sense of shame. And vulnerability is the other side of that. It's to say, right now, I might not have control over the things that I'm experiencing right now, and I need to be able to experience them, that vulnerability, in this moment, so that I can release it. But in relationship, what vulnerability does it that it shows other people that, oh, you're not this brick wall of a person with no emotions, right? That you're a human being. And if somebody has a negative reaction to that, another person might jump in and say, what do you mean they shouldn't be crying? Of course he should be crying. It makes total sense that he should be crying right now. And the expectation that he shouldn't be crying at this point in time is unrealistic and it's unhealthy. There's a reason why the statistics have shown that like 80 that men make up 80% of the suicide rates every year. That's 4 to 1. It's an amazing number of men who feel like they have nowhere else to go, who feel completely trapped in the world where supposedly they have all of this privilege, right? But yeah, there's privilege in one way and there's suffering caged in another.
As you were talking, I was thinking about how often sometimes we get caught in this battle of, well, you know, like we were just talking about postpartum, right? Like, of course, we should be thinking about mom and her baby and remember that they're part of this larger system that includes dad, right? Or even, two fathers and how hard that can be. And I'm just thinking about those parts that are just overworking, right? Constantly like, I have to be strong. I have to go to work. I have to make sure we are able to afford the things we need to. Now I have this child to take care of. And it just, like you said, I think piles up and there's nowhere to take that. So these parts exile that worry, right? And then they beef up and get stronger as protectors. And then eventually overwhelmed.
It puts men almost immediately into this place of one, dysregulation, and to be dysregulated while you're trying to care for a new baby and your partner. It's just not a good place to be. So the at the time of birth is actually even a little too late to even provide fathers or men who are expectant parents to with support, because just as their partners are going through this, so this is in the case of pregnancy, right? Because you also have men becoming fathers in other ways as well. But that through pregnancy, men experience hormonal changes right along with their pregnant partners, not to the same extent, but they're still experiencing it. And so there are shifts and changes in their physical and physiology and things that are happening to them that maybe they know something about, maybe they know absolutely nothing about, and it could potentially impact their mood, their stamina, the way that they are engaging in their daily process, which could then add to, right, the frustration, the irritation, those kinds of things. So it really is super important that men attend to and have support around um, the prenatal process, the prenatal developmental process, because they need to be as ready as their partner is to take on this new task of parenting a baby. So in my bio, I'm a part of the diversity informed tenets for work with infants, children, and families. And tenet number 2 talks about that children have rights. And that the global community needs to be caring not for the children, but for their families and communities, so that their families and communities could care for the children, right? That the responsibility for the children are with the families, but that society and culture have the responsibility to hold and support the caregivers for those children so that they can provide children with the care, the love, the nurturance, the resources, all of the things that children need to grow and develop into, beautiful, loving, contributing community members as well. So it's uh, it's not it's not about just the children when babies are being born, and it's not just about the pregnant and birthing person. It's about every person within that community that helps to raise and care for all of the caregivers that's necessary.
As you were saying that, I was thinking about how new parts of a man's internal family systems might come to fruition as well, and how they might start working and start exiling other parts, or how they might come on to protect, right? And then I was also thinking about brain development, right? Like, unfortunately, us guys, we develop later in life, that prefrontal cortex. And then thinking about just men's ages when children are born and how much they're just coming online and making good decisions for themselves. And now they have this new child to think about and the pressure that comes around that. I'm wondering, Nietzsche, how do you see, what kind of exiles do you usually see in working with men?
I think there's a struggle. I think for men who are transitioning into parenthood, there's a struggle, and I think the struggle began when they become partnered. Is that in our society and culture, we're raised and socialized to be these strong, do-it-yourself individuals, the whole bootstrap type of thinking, that I can do it alone, that I don't need the support. If I ask for help, I'm weak. Um, and then when you're partnered, now you're like, I'm partnered, but I need to give to this other person as well. I need to share a little bit of myself. I can't be just me, the rock that stands alone in the middle of, whatever, the ocean, the island. There's now 2 of us. How do I incorporate another person into my worldview, into my way of being, into my consideration of the things that I need to do to be successful in this world? And success, I think, in our society is an individualistic, it's individualistically defined. Um, so now you're partnered, and now you have a baby coming. And the baby not only is another person that you have to look after, but the baby is completely dependent on us. So you might be sharing this responsibility with your partner, but it's a lot of responsibility, especially if you're not taught to think about yourself as part of community. Right? There's a perspective and a worldview that I think in our broader society that really disadvantages us as men, and as individuals generally, into family life, is that we don't necessarily think of ourselves as individuals in community, embedded in community, and so the community's well-being is my well-being. We think about well-being as being an individual state, but that it's actually our community's well-being that's really important. And so we care for the community cares for us. And if we throw everything that we have into our care and love for this new baby and our partner, then we hope that the community would be there supporting us along the way as well. And generally, men don't have that support. And this is wrestling, right? This wrestling between I'm a part of a larger whole, me, partner, baby, and I'm this individual that I have to rely on and push through um, without support.
It reminds me so much of kind of like that struggle between like self energy, right, in the different parts, and how that sometimes we lose, right, and that part takes over, and how we have to sometimes tune back in. I was also thinking about what you said about well-being being kind of not well-being, I'm sorry, success. That's individually determined. And I don't think I really figured that out until I had a foster child.
Mm-hmm.
And then that foster child, thankfully, went back to his family. But it was a different life than I wanted for that child. And I think that was really hard. Realization was like, it doesn't have to be this way. It can look like this, and that's okay too. I think I struggled a really long time for that. So I think sometimes as men, we get the message still to this day, right? Like success is 2 cars in the driveway, the white picket fence, the big house, and lots of kids.
And everything that we know about, happiness is about connection and about relationship, right? So it's hard to be in relationship when your mindset is about like, how do I as an individual achieve success as an individual when we're not attending to the relationships around us.
Yeah. It's so funny. I'm thinking about like my teens and even my 20-year-old clients. And a lot of that is formed in those years. Like, how am I going to afford that house? How am I going to get those cars, right? Like, I'm such a failure already. I'm never going to achieve those things.
I have my own stories around this because I think the journey, and I was trying to decide whether or not to share this. But it's my coming out story. I was 17 when I started kind of thinking like, yeah, I'm not who my parents want me to be. I am not the person that they're hoping would give them the bountiful numbers of grandchildren, because at the time, this was in the 80s, late 80s, um, there weren't role models of, same-sex families. And so the idea of coming out as or thinking that I'm gay became a blow to all of the definitions of what it means to be a man, to be male. And I mean, it came with the whole gamut of things. Like that queer children or queer teens are much more likely to have suicide ideation and to try to commit suicide. Um, than their heterosexual counterparts or peers. And I was definitely, in that camp. I had committed or cut. I was cutting. I had suicide ideation relatively often, um, and it wasn't until I was able to say to myself, with the support of a friend um, who was able to say to me. So this is an example of leaning into that vulnerability, right? It's kind of like this point of shame about who I am and who I feel I am and who I'm expected to be. I share with my friend that that I think I might be gay or bi or something, and them taking that information and saying, it doesn't matter. It's the vulnerability that is met with acceptance that allowed me then to say, okay, so there's a possibility here. But what else does that possibility look like? What does the definition of being a man mean now if there's a possibility of me continuing to live this life? So I was completely willing to accept at that point in time for me to be me, I need to give up the prospect of ever being in a long-term relationship because there were no role models. I need to give up the possibility of having a child because there were no role models. Um, so my going into my young adulthood years was with the expectation that I won't have long-term relationships, lasting, loving relationships. I will never have a child of my own, right? That I could potentially work with children and yet still have to be careful, right? Because there's still that paranoia around gay men being around children. Um, and so that definition narrows. It was that narrow definition that said, if you're going to be male, these are the things that are necessary. And if you're not, if you don't fit into that, there are things that you're going to give up, you're going to lose along the way. Um, and that message is constant. My parents reinforced it. The media reinforced it all the time. Um, and heck, growing up, I meet somebody. I've been in a relationship for 30 plus years now. I have a 20-year-old son. None of the things that I had accepted as being true about being male and a man was the case. So it's one of those things where, like, are we allowing ourselves to explore a little bit further, to widen our scope and vision of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a father, what it means to be a husband? Um, are there ways for us to push back on the expectations and responsibilities that society and culture has for us? And I'm talking about the wider culture, right? That not it's not it's this is the constant pressure and images and um that we're bombarded with all the time. How do we push back on that? How do we come to understand our authentic selves as men? And when I say authentic, I'm meaning the way that we see ourselves and want to be, that we make the decision on how we want to be, not be influenced by the pressures and expectations and responsibilities that society is putting on us, that other people are putting on us. It's authentic because we're determining it. We're putting it out there. And we want to make sure that when we put it out there, that it's also not being influenced by, right? All of the other things. Um, that's that's hard in our society and in our culture. Coming to terms with, like, who are we authentically? How do we want to be in relationship with others? And what that means to us, what does it look like? How should it feel? All of those things are really hard. And those are all the little parts that tells us this is the masculine man. Um, this is the not so masculine, emotive person. Right? Like, you lose it automatically. It's like the terminology just kind of goes away because it's now outside the bounds of the definition. It's like, oh, who's defining it?
I think something that's really important that you said was like role models, right? And what happens once we let go and we accept that sometimes we have to let go and take the jump, so to speak, right? And trust ourselves that we know what's good for us and the freedom that comes from that. Well, also thinking about, like, it sucks to be a man sometimes because the amount of firefighters that we have. So, as usual, we never have enough time. But I'm wondering, Nietzsche, for the men listening, what's one small first step towards breaking that silence?
Um, I think that it's really important to be able to take a deep breath and then to ask ourselves, is this who we want to be with our partner and with our child or children? Because if it's not, then that at least opens the door. Is this how I want to be with my partner and with my children? Is this how I want them to respond to me as their father or caregiver? And if it's not, that at least opens the door for us to explore a little bit differently, explore a little further, widen our scope.
I think the only thing I would add to that is this who I want my children to be?
Absolutely.
If you feel safe, try sending one honest text today. It can be simple, but it matters. Like and subscribe. All right, so let's do a real quick tool check for supporting your mental health as a man. So first, just do a micro check-in. It can be as simple as asking yourself, what part of me is active right now? Second, just name the pressure. A part of me feels like I have to be strong. Naming it reduces the grip. Third, just rewrite that script. What would my younger self say if he felt safe? Create a connection ritual. Once a week, tell someone one true thing about how you're really doing. Something to reflect on? What's one part of you that could rest this week? As always, share your reflection or tag me on Instagram at Mindfulness Within Podcast. Your story could help someone else feel less alone. Nucha, would you like to do our guided meditation reflection?
This is a guided reflection titled The Strong Ones Within. If it's safe, close your eyes or soften your gaze. Take a breath in and a slow breath out. Bring awareness to the parts of you that work hard to stay strong. Maybe they stand tall. Maybe they brace your shoulders. Maybe they silence your voice. Just notice them. Keep breathing. Now imagine yourself, the calm, compassionate core within you, approaching these parts gently. And say, "Thank you for protecting me. I'm here with you now. You don't have to carry everything." Notice if something shifts, even slightly. Take one more breath. Inhale. And exhale slowly. When you're ready, gently thank these protectors for revealing themselves.
If you'd like more guided practices like this, there's a bonus meditation called A Gentle Space for Men's Emotions, available on this podcast channel. Men's mental health deserves our care, our attention, and our compassion. Your protectors have worked hard for you. Your emotions are not failures. Your vulnerability is not weakness. it's wisdom. This week, when a part of you steps in to protect, pause, take a breath, and let yourself, the steady, grounded core within, lead with kindness. If today's conversation brought you insight or comfort, please share this episode, leave a review, or pass it to someone who may need it. Your actions help this message reach others walking in a quiet struggle. If you would like deeper support or want to explore your inner system through IFS therapy, I'd be honored to walk with you. You can find my website at onemindonheartcounseling.com. There's a link in the show notes. Again, thank you, Nietzsche, for being present today. I can't wait to see you at the ACT program once again.
Thank you, Gil.
Until next time, be gentle with yourself, honor your inner world, and remember, you don't have to walk this path alone.